For the attendees that are with us this evening and those that are about to join, welcome to this Zoom space with us tonight. And thank you for being here. I can't promise this is going to be the most scintillating hour of your life, but this is really important work. And it really takes as many people as we can get engaged to make it as robust and representative as we can. So thank you for taking the time. It really means a lot to us. And it means a lot to the decision makers too, who are asked to make big, hard, complex decisions to represent your interests. So thank you. So before we get started, I'm just going to introduce our team. My name is Dilo Freitas. I'm a senior planner here at the City of Arcata. And I'm joined on the staff side by my colleague, Jennifer Dart, who's the Deputy Director for the Community Development Department. Our director, David, is currently sailing with his wife and children and will be for the remainder of the week. So we are holding down the fort here. We're also joined by Ben Noble, who's our form-based code consultant, and he'll be providing the majority of the information tonight, as well as Maricela Aceves-Wexler, who you'll probably hear me calling Sella, because that is the name that I know her best by. And Sella is with Heather Equinos Consulting and will be helping to run our polling this evening. So Jen and I will be taking kind of a back seat. Ben and Sella will be doing the majority of the presentation, and we will be fielding any technical assistance with the polling. So really briefly, just running through the objectives of this meeting, we're intending to provide an opportunity to both educate participants on key aspect of design that's going to guide the development standards that we build into our form-based code, as well as gather really important and relevant input from attendees on design priorities and preferences. And this is intended to be a really targeted workshop to provide information to the Planning Commission and the City Council as your decision makers in advance of their study session the evening of August 23rd, which is a week from today, in the evening at 6 p.m. And that meeting will be open to the public and held in person here at City Hall. And this is our second form-based code educational opportunity and our first where we've held an interactive workshop related to preparing this form-based code for the Arcata Gateway area. And we do plan to hold a second workshop in the next couple of months to dig into more topics that we aren't going to have time to cover this evening. And tonight, we'll mostly be spending our time focusing on areas that we've heard are most important to the community at this stage, and that is massing, height, and our proposed community benefits system. And a couple just basics of the agenda. I'm going to kind of give a little bit of context for folks who might be coming into this new and don't have a lot of background yet on how we got to where we are today. And then I will be handing it off to Sella and to Ben to run us through some of the education around the form-based code elements we're going to be talking about tonight and doing a lot of polling. And then we will lay out next steps and close. Be prepared to poll throughout. This is going to be a dynamic meeting with many presentations separated by polling. We practiced this beforehand, and it's definitely very dynamic, as I said. So don't walk away. And plan for it to take about an hour, up to an hour and a half of polling and educational content before we close this evening. And I'm going to turn it over now to Sella briefly to run us through some of the polling and kind of guide us through some warm-up questions to make sure everybody understands the software.
Thank you, Dilo. Hello, all. My name is Maricela Aceves-Wexler. As Dilo said, I'm often known as Sella or Madi. And it's a pleasure to be here supporting the City of Arcata and you all through this evening's workshop. I want to start with a brief overview of the technology we're using today. This workshop is being recorded and it will be available on the city's YouTube channel. We're also running the workshop as a webinar with live polling, and I'll be giving instructions on how to participate, and we'll practice with that shortly. Please note that we will not be monitoring the raise your hand function today, which is located at the bottom of your webinar window. If you are having technical issues, city staff, Jen and Dilo, will be available at the email addresses and number that you see on the slide here to offer technical support as needed. So please take a moment to note that contact information should you need it. It'll also come up on the next slide and mentioned a couple other times through as we go if you do need that information again. There will be additional feedback opportunities following this workshop, including a post-workshop feedback form and in upcoming workshops and city engagements. So if there's anything that comes up tonight where you wanted to offer more insight or comments or questions, there will be further opportunities. For those who are not able to make it tonight, or if anyone is not able to get the polling software to work for some reason, there will be a survey with the same information and questions that can be filled out at a later time. And finally, a reminder to have grace for ourselves and each other as we go through this process together. All right, Slido, or Gila, if you could go, thank you so much for our Slido instructions. So we're going to be using instant polling throughout this session using Slido. So let's get that set up and complete our first round of questions. So you can open a browser on your smartphone or any other device of your choosing, computer, tablet. And once you get there with your new browser, enter slido.com. Once on the main page, you'll see a long blue oval at the top where you can enter the session code. It will ask, are you joining as a participant? And in there, you will enter the code FBC16. And you can also access the poll by scanning the QR code here on the screen. We're going to be using Slido a lot in today's workshop, so please leave this page open throughout for ease of access and participation. And if for some reason you do close out of the browser, no worries, no problem. There will be reminders for how to get back to Slido as we go along. And if you have any issues, you can contact city staff for technical support. And just to reiterate one more time, if for some reason Slido is not working for you, a survey with the same information being covered tonight will be available on the city's webpage. So let's practice with the tool and get an idea of who is tuning into this event. As has been done in past engagements, the City of Arcata would like to learn some basic information about who is present so they can get an idea of whose voices and perspectives are being represented this evening and who might be missing as they continue the engagement process. So let's try our first poll. If you haven't already, please make your way to slido.com. And again, here is information for the login code, and we'll get started on our first poll. Let's begin by learning what you love about Arcata. Offer maybe a 1 to 3 word answer here. And once you're done, go ahead and move on to the next set of questions, and then we will review the responses together. So for who's in the room, one thing you love about Arcata, are you a renter owner? Who are you representing tonight? Perhaps you're a resident of Arcata and representing an institution, organization, etc. What race best represents you, Hispanic ethnicity if applicable, and your age. So we'll give folks some time to get to the Slido page and start to fill out the poll. All right, we've got responses coming in. 24 participants.
Like the cute little crabs emoji. Go crabs. Looks like 28 people are logged on, and I'm assuming we have a few more that probably are still coming.
I see 30 on there now. So you can continue to add in here. I'll start reviewing what some folks have already entered. For this first question, what is one thing you love about Arcata? Clearly, there is a lot to love. Some of the more common words that folks have been entering include walkability. So that's the largest one that we see here on the screen. Community, small town feel, and other things to love. You'll see all around: farmers market, the people, student energy, the marsh, etc. So yes, lots to love. And you can keep adding into this list. Let's see what else we've got for who's in the room. All right. We have renters and owners. 37% of participants tonight currently own their homes, 33%. This does not apply to them, and 28% are renters. For what race best represents you, 89% of folks responded with white, 6% two or more races, 3% American Indian or Alaska Native, 3% Black or African American. And where Hispanic ethnicity applies, well, 89% it does not apply. 7% are Mexican, Mexican American, Chicano, 3% another Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin. And who is represented tonight? We have 54% showing up as residents representing themselves, 17% outside of Arcata, residing outside of Arcata, 12% representing government agencies, followed by nonprofits and community-based organizations, and 5% small businesses. Okay, and for our ages in the room, 39% are millennials, Generation Y, 29% baby boomer generation, 27% Generation X, and then we've got 2% tied for pre-baby boomer and Generation Z. Well, thank you all so much for participating in our first poll. Please leave the Slido browser open, and we will be coming back to poll again very soon and often. Back over to you, Dilo, to give us a little more context for what's ahead.
Thank you. Okay, let me share my screen again. I'm excited to see we're capturing a pretty diverse group of ages in the mix tonight. This is important long-range planning work that will have impacts for future generations. So thank you for coming and representing. Okay. So I'm going to give a little bit of that context that I promised you all. For anyone in the audience who may not yet be super familiar with our process, this here is the Gateway Area Plan. And the Gateway Area Plan originated as a strategy to address the city's housing shortage. And it's part of the Strategic Infill Redevelopment Program, which is a program that we've been working on for the past few years. And although it is one of many strategies that we hope to use to support the creation of additional housing, the Gateway area is special in that it was planned for this residential rezone through the adoption of our housing element in 2019 by the City Council. The plan has been out for close to a year. It was released December 1st of 2021, and we're currently in the process of incorporating feedback from the public, the various city committees, the Planning Commission, and the public through this meeting tonight as well, and we'll be working on that over the course of the next few months. And in a moment, I will be showing you where you can find the draft plan and the draft engagement report that accompanies it on the website if you would like to learn more after the meeting. So a little bit of the vision for the Gateway area that feeds into the work that we're doing tonight. This plan is acknowledging our extreme need for housing in this community, and it's aiming to create additional opportunity for the development of high-density, mixed-use residential infill projects in a particular part of the city. But in addition to creating a streamlined pathway to create much-needed housing, the vision for this plan is to create a vibrant, distinct and attractive series of neighborhoods that are built through creative placemaking. And that's what we're going to be working on tonight. The vision of this Gateway area is to create new development that is taller and denser than what has occurred in Arcata in the past, but we also are working to ensure that new buildings reflect the architectural values, livability, and aesthetic expectations of this community. And if you want to learn more about what the vision actually says of this plan, I definitely would recommend looking at the Gateway Area at a Glance page, which is page 3 of the draft plan, where you can locate the vision in its entirety. And, how do we ensure that this vision, this beautiful vision that we've set through this plan, becomes a reality? A key part of that is the approach that we're going to be going through tonight, which is the development of specific regulations that will guide the physical form of all new development in the Gateway area. And as I mentioned, this is our second workshop on form-based codes, where we will be exploring elements of this form-based code framework that will be guiding design. And the workshops will be covering the 6 aspects of design, as Ben will explain, which are lot configuration, building placement, access and parking, building massing, facade design, and other site features such as landscaping requirements. And tonight, we are focusing on building massing and height, which will also include ways to minimize the scale of large buildings, because we know from the engagement that we have done that this is one of the most important topics to the community, one of the most important things to get right, and one of the areas that the community still wants to learn a lot about and provide feedback on. So we also will be touching on community benefits that we're exploring to incentivize developers to provide community amenities in exchange for increased building height as a related topic to height in the various zones of the Gateway area. And we wanted to also just draw your attention to where on the website you can find this information. If you Google into your favorite browser, Strategic Infill Redevelopment Program Arcata, or even SIRP Arcata, what you're going to find is this page. And it has information about what the Gateway Area Plan is and a hour-long video running through the current draft document. And if you go to the How Do I Get Involved tab, you also are able to review our draft engagement report, which is a sub-tab of that page. And in that engagement report, you will see a variety of engagement events that we've held over the last almost 2 years now, to kind of, share information about this plan and understand what the priorities are from the public. But we have not specifically dug into the nitty-gritty of design yet, which is why this is such an important and exciting moment to be at in this process. And we're finally beginning to ground truth what good design looks like in an Arcata context and begin to reflect back what we are understanding as the priorities of this community. And through the course of all of these public meetings and walking tours and committee meetings and planning commission meetings and council meetings, we do feel like we have a sense, at least, of some of the key areas of both concern and opportunity when we're talking about refining design standards for the Gateway area. And so I'm going to just go through those right now before I turn it over to Ben. So design matters to Arcata, and that has been clear since the release of the plan, and has been clear for many, many years. And we definitely have felt that there's been a consensus around support for the current mix of uses, activity, and funky feel of the area surrounding the Creamery building, and that should be built upon and not replaced. People are also supportive of encouraging more street level activity in the area through projects that incorporate art, lighting, community gathering spaces, and other amenities with a mix of both urban spaces and greenery. Development of this form-based code can also speak to the community's interest in building a more cohesive visual identity for the Gateway area, which was raised often by folks who attended our walking tours throughout last summer and fall. And through this development as well, we are hoping to ensure that the Creamery District and surrounding area does not lose its distinctiveness, but instead remains a very pleasant place to spend time. Form-based code standards can meaningfully guide building placement, storefront entries, windows, and other site features to ensure that future development will result in pedestrian-friendly, vibrant, and mixed-use neighborhoods that tie into and complement existing development. And I think, one thing we also have really picked up on is, in addition to being pedestrian friendly, we recognize the interest from the community in ensuring that all these neighborhoods just feel friendly for everyone, because that is good design and practice. And that is a community feeling that Arcata has successfully fostered through good design standards for many, many years. And we want to continue to build on that legacy as we plan for future development. So we have heard concerns tied to site development and redevelopment specifically related to height and massing. And tonight we want to highlight these issues and provide some information on some techniques and tools in our toolbox that will guide good design. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ben so he can really dig into the details with us.
Thank you, Dilo. So you can see my screen okay? And you can hear me?
I can hear you and see you and your screen.
Excellent. All right. Okay, so thank you, Dilo. Again, my name is Ben Noble. I'm part of the consultant team working on the Gateway Plan and the form-based code for the Gateway area. And as Dilo mentioned, we're here tonight to hear your thoughts on important aspects of the code. But before we do that, I want to briefly provide some background information on what a form-based code is, why we're preparing a form-based code for the Gateway area, and anticipated contents of the Gateway area form-based code. And so for those of you who have watched the informational presentation that was put forward a month or so ago, this is a summary of some of that information, but we did want to provide this just to make sure that everybody had the same baseline information. So what is a form-based code? So at its essence, a form-based code is a land development regulation that implements a plan with physical form as its organizing principle. The form-based code emphasizes the relationships between building facades and the public realm, the form and mass of buildings in relation to one another, the scale and type of streets and open spaces. So whereas conventional zoning codes typically emphasize allowed uses and the separation of allowed uses into distinct districts, form-based code de-emphasizes the separation of uses and typically encourages a more fine-grained mix of land uses. And a form-based contains objective standards that are not guidelines, are not subjective requirements, but are clear prescriptive requirements for new development. And lastly, a form-based code typically presents standards in both words as well as clearly drawn diagrams and other visuals. So that's a summary of what a form-based code is. And then the question is, well, why is the city preparing a form-based code for the Gateway area? Well, the city's preparing a form-based code because the form-based code will be an effective tool to implement the vision of the Gateway Plan and to produce high-quality housing desired for the community. Compared to traditional zoning, a form-based code offers a number of important advantages, including its ease of use, its ability to help create a desired sense of place, its emphasis on the quality of the public realm, including publicly accessible open spaces, its ability to deliver predictability for applicants and the community, and its flexibility with land use regulations to respond to market conditions changing over time. So at the present moment, we anticipate that the Gateway area form-based code will include a regulating plan, which is essentially a map that divides the area into different sub-areas, form and character standards for these different sub-areas. It will identify allowed uses within each sub-area. There will also be standards that apply citywide to address, area-wide to address topics such as parking and historic resources and natural resource protection. There'll be a section and standards for streetscape and public open space, a community benefits program, which I'll describe in greater detail later, as well as permit requirements for different types of development. So the Gateway Area Plan, the draft Gateway Area Plan that Dilo summarized, currently divides the plan area into 4 sub-areas shown on the screen. And we anticipate that the form-based code will use these same subareas with standards specifically tailored to the purpose and vision for these subareas. Later tonight, we will ask your thoughts about possible standards for these subareas. So I'll take a few moments now to review the location and vision for each subarea. So first, the barrel subarea. It's shown here as the light yellow area bounded by the dashed red line. And this area is north of Samoa and west of M Street up to 8th Street, and is currently home to the Wing Inflatables and the FedEx building. And so the draft gateway plan envisions this area to become a high-density, walkable residential campus that prioritizes bicycle and pedestrian transportation. The hub sub-area is shown in blue on the screen, again bounded by the dash red line. And this is the area north of 8th Street up to the northern limits of the plan area. The draft gateway area plan envisions this hub sub-area to become a vibrant, high-intensity mixed-use area anchored by the creamery. The third sub-area is the gateway corridor sub-area. It's shown here in orange on your screen. And this sub-area includes parcels fronting Samoa east of L Street and properties fronting L and K Street south of 12th Street. And the draft gateway area plan envisions the corridor sub-area to become an active, inviting, high-intensity mixed-use development area along major bicycle and vehicular gateways into the city. And the fourth and last sub-area is the neighborhood sub-area, shown in brown with the dashed red lines on the screen. And the neighborhood sub-area is intended to serve as a transition to lower intensity residential uses outside of the gateway plan area. So these are the sub-areas that are identified in the draft gateway area plan. And will be a framework for the form-based code. And for each of these sub-areas, the form-based code will contain objective standards for the physical form of development. The code will address issues relating to lot configuration, so the size and dimensions of parcels, building placement, so where buildings are located on the parcel, the location and the design of vehicular access and parking, building massing, which we'll be focusing on tonight, the design of facades, and other site features. So all of these dimensions of urban design contribute to the quality of development and will be addressed in the form-based code. Massing standards, we think, are particularly important for the form-based code and will be a focus of our meeting tonight. And at future meetings, we'll be addressing some of these other issues. So I'm now going to speak a bit more about building massing before we ask for your input on possible massing strategies for the gateway area. I'm going to cover what building massing is, some options that we are thinking about for the gateway area, and then we'll do some more of the Slido instant polling to hear your thoughts about some of these options and strategies. So generally speaking, building massing is the perception of the general shape, form, and size of the building. It's the three-dimensional configuration of building volume on the site, and it's the sense of space that the building encloses. And height is part of building massing, but it's only one component, only one dimension of the three-dimensional configuration of the building volume on the site. So here's a graphic illustrating what might be referred to as Boxy building massing. So this shows a building form with one single volume, uniform height, and no breaks in the building walls. In contrast, here's a more modulated building massing on the same site with multiple smaller volumes, variation in building height, and breaks in building walls. Now, the gateway plan, the draft gateway plan, includes policies that call for this more modulated building massing for larger scale development. Specifically, the plan calls for human scale and pedestrian-friendly building massing where large buildings are broken into smaller volumes that fit into the surrounding neighborhood. Form-based code will implement this policy with standards that require modulated building massing and prohibit monolithic blocks. Tonight, we want to share with you some of these potential standards, and you receive your feedback on whether you think a particular standard or strategy is desirable for the gateway area. Based on that input, we'll be able to further develop and refine these massing strategies that will ultimately be incorporated into the form-based code. So these potential strategies are upper story step backs, variation in building height, and breaks in street-facing building walls. Now, I'll start by describing the upper story step back standard, and then we'll ask for your feedback on this standard using the Slido polling software. After receiving your input on upper story step backs, we'll repeat that process for variation in building height standards and the breaks in street-facing building wall standards. Okay, so upper story step backs. This is our first massing strategy that we wanted to share with you that we've been thinking about for the gateway area. An upper story step back standard would require building walls above a certain height to be set back from the building walls below. Upper story step backs could be required when facing a street or when adjacent to a lower intensity use. I'll now show you 3 examples of buildings with upper story step backs to help you consider whether an upper story step back requirement would be desirable for the gateway area. So here's a photograph of a 3-story mixed-use building right up against the sidewalk with housing above ground floor commercial. Now, the entire length of the street-facing 3rd story is stepped back about 10 feet from the 1st and 2nd floor building wall below. So this is an example of a 3rd story step back. Here's a larger building. This is a 7-story mixed-use building, again, with housing above ground floor commercial. And with this building, the 6th and 7th stories are stepped back about 40 feet on the street side across from existing lower intensity homes on a side street. So this is another example of a step back requirement. And here's the 3rd example. Here's a building, again, vertical mixed use with commercial ground floor facing the main street and then residential above. You actually can't see the commercial so much from this view because this is from the side street. What you can see mostly here is just residential uses part of the project. And here we have 2 stories that are immediately adjacent a side property line that's shared with an existing single family home. And then the building steps up from that to 3 stories. And then from there, 4 stories with the maximum building height of being 50 feet. So this is another application and another example of a upper story step back. So like I said, these are some strategies, some massing strategies that we're considering for the gateway area. There are others that we'll talk about in a few minutes, but we now want to hear your thoughts on whether upper story step backs is something that should be required for new development in the gateway area. And also as a reminder, if you're experiencing any trouble with Slido, you can contact Dilo or Jen for tech support, but hopefully this is all going well from you. So with that, I will hand it back to Sela.
Thanks so much, Ben. All right, let's head on back to our Slido page to get an idea of where, if at all, you think the design aspects that Ben is covering should be applied to the gateway area. There will be an opportunity to offer additional suggestions or ideas related to breaking up building massing after we go through each design aspect with a little more open format question. So just stay tuned for that. If you do need to reopen Slido, there's a QR code and also the information to get back to polling here on the shared screen. Okay. For upper story step backs, the questions are, where do you think this strategy should be applied for the gateway area? And in that poll, you can click on the image. If you wanted to take a closer look, you can zoom in a little bit. So do you think that this should be applied to all of the gateway plan areas, apply to some of the sub areas? Maybe you think it shouldn't be included at all in the form-based code. So we'll take some time to fill that in. We've got responses coming in. And for those who answered apply to some of the gateway plan sub areas, the next question is, which areas do you think it should be applied to? And you can pick as many as you think it should apply to. Right. So I think we've got about 50 plus participants the last I checked here tonight, and about 40 responses that I see coming in. So we'll wait just a minute more to get more data. All right. 56% of folks who've responded thus far think that upper story step back should be applied to some of the gateway plan sub areas, 37% to all of the plan, and 9% do not think it should be included at all. For those who answered apply to some of the sub areas, 74% think it should be applied to the neighborhood, 48% to the hub, tied for corridor with 48%, and 30% for the barrel. Great. Thank you very much for participating in that poll. And please, again, leave your Slido page open for more polling. And Ben's now going to present on variation in building height.
Great. Thank you so much. So the next massing strategy that we've been thinking about is the requirement for varied building heights on a single development site. And there's sort of two possible ways to approach this. One is to have a rule that buildings above a certain height must include variation in the number of stories within that development project. There's another way to get at it where upper level building stories can't exceed a certain percentage of the ground floor footprint. That might be another way to get at this, but two approaches to a varied building height requirement. And so I'll show, again, 3 examples of development that has varied building height. So here's a multifamily residential building. And on this one development site, there are the building is divided into distinct volumes, each with a different height. So you can see on your left, there are these townhomes that are at 2 stories with a steeply pitched roof. The building volume that's at the corner is at 4+ stories. There's another volume to the right of that that's 3 stories. And then sort of more at the rear of the property, there's a 4th volume that is again at 4 stories. So here's an example of a single larger development site where a building is divided into multiple volumes, each of which has a different height. So here's a second example. This is the side of the building, actually. To your right is sort of a mixed use ground floor commercial, upper story residential. And to your left is a separate structure, but it's part of the same development site. That's sort of townhomes that are oriented to the interior of the lot. And you can see that there's a lower intensity residential use to the left of that townhome component of the project. And you can see that the project is divided into these multiple buildings, with the row of townhomes to the left being 3 stories, and then the larger, taller main building being at 5 stories. So this is another example of a project that incorporates varied building heights, in part to provide a sensitive transition to the lower intensity uses that are abutting the rear. Okay, and so here is the third example. Again, a mixed use building. This photograph is from the side, so you can't really see the commercial component. You can see a little bit of it to your left, but to the right of your screen, that's purely residential as part of this larger project. And you can see here again that at the main street, which is off to the left of your screen, you have this vertical mixed-use component of the project with 4 stories, housing above ground floor commercials. And then at the interior of the site, that's where the tallest portion of this building is, at 5 stories. You also have a 4-story component of the project at the interior of the site. And then to the right, there is a 3-story component. These are townhomes that are facing lower intensity, mostly single-family homes to the rear street. So again, height variation that is used to provide visual interest and to break up massing, but also to provide for sensitive transitions to adjacent lower intensity residential uses. So we're interested in your thoughts on this strategy. Again, we're exploring massing strategies to break up large buildings into smaller volumes to avoid monolithic blocks that we've heard people really want to avoid. This is, varied building height is a strategy that we're thinking about, and we're interested in your thoughts on this strategy and whether you think it might be appropriate for the Gateway area. So I'll pass it back to Stella.
All right, y'all, you knew this was coming. We're going back to Slido. And we're going to answer the same set of questions as we did before in our last strategy. So go ahead and make your way to slido.com if you did close out of your tab. And again, that code is FBC16 to access the live polling. Where do you think variation in building height should be applied for the Gateway area? To all, some sub areas, or not included at all? And again, for those who answered some of the sub areas, please also answer the second question as to which areas you think it should be applied to. Oops. So with close to 50 respondents, nearly 50% think this should be applied to all of the area plan, 33% to some, and 18% do not think it should be included in the form-based code. For those who wanted to specify which areas, which sub-areas, Gateway Corridor and Neighborhood are tied for the highest percentage. 73% of respondents think it should be applied in those sub-areas, 59% for Hub, and 50% for the Barrel District. And I'll leave this open a little bit longer as Ben continues on with the next strategy, if you want to continue entering in. And then I'll close that as we prepare for our final poll for this section.
Thanks, Stella. And so now we'll talk about the third and final of these massing strategies. And one thing I would say is that these strategies are not necessarily mutually exclusive. The form-based code for the gateway area could include all three of these strategies. They can be combined in different ways to promote sort of a more walkable, community-oriented gateway area, which was, two concepts that really rose to the top when we first heard your thoughts on what you love about Arcata. So this third strategy is breaks in the street-facing wall. So this strategy would sort of can be accomplished in sort of two general ways. So one is to have a rule saying that there's a maximum width of a street-facing building. So a building beyond a certain width, whether it's, say, 150 feet, for example, that's not allowed. And if you had a longer building, it would need to be broken into two or more buildings. Another way to achieve a similar effect is to require long buildings to include a large break in the street-facing facade. So it appears as if a longer building is divided into smaller volumes or modules, but isn't separated into actual separate buildings. So let's see here. So I'm going to give again a couple of photographic examples of this strategy. Here is a townhome development, a row of townhomes that are facing the street. And this building, including all of the units, has a width of 135 feet with 6 units within that 135 feet. So one possible strategy, maybe for certain areas or the gateway area overall, is to establish a maximum width of any single building. So here's another example. This is a multifamily project. It's actually a pretty cool project with rooftop gardens and plantings that cascade or will cascade over the side of the buildings as the plantings mature. And you can see here that when viewed from the street, there are 4 main building volumes that read as distinct volumes because they're separated by elevated exterior walkways. And there's one main large 15-foot separation in the middle, and then there are 2 smaller 5-foot separations as well. So these volumes are connected, but they do read as distinct volumes from the street. And here's my third and final example of breaks in street-facing building facades. This is a large building, a larger mixed-use building that's fronting a busy street, and there's a large break in this front facade. It's a 15-foot by 25-foot break in the street-facing facade. So those are examples of facade break requirements that we're thinking about for the Gateway Code, and we're now interested in your thoughts on whether or not this might be an appropriate strategy for the gateway area.
Thank you, Ben. So we are back over in Slido, and at this point, you know the drill here. For breaks in street-facing building walls, please specify if you think that these should be applied at all in the gateway area, whether to all of it, some, or not at all. And if you think it should be applied to some, please select as many as you think it should apply to in the second question. We'll give folks some time as those responses come in. A little bit of movement still on the bars, so we'll give it just a little bit longer here. All right. So far, the majority of respondents, at 58%, think this should apply to all of the Gateway Area Plan. 25% or so applying to some of the Gateway Plan. If it still moves around here, updating live. And 17% think it should not be included at all. If you think it should apply to some, again, I think we had 75% last time also. 75% tie at the top between hub and corridor for breaks in street-facing building walls, followed by gateway neighborhood as another place folks think it's important to imply this strategy, and 50% for gateway barrel. All right, and again, I'll leave that open just a little bit longer if folks are still getting over there to enter your feedback. And we are going to stay on Slido and pull for some ideas, your other ideas related to massing strategies. So please hold off in this portion for this question on entering building height suggestions, because we are going to be spending time on that more specifically later on in the session. Please save comments and questions for later in this more open format for questioning, and use this time to generate suggestions and ideas that you may have related to breaking up building massing other than what you've heard so far. So we just want to see in the room what brilliance is present that maybe wasn't represented yet tonight. So I will make that live for us.
Bella, would you be interested in sharing your screen for this portion of
I
it?
would love to. Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe that would be something you would like to do.
All right. So please respond. Do you have other ideas for strategies to break up the massing of larger buildings, or other suggestions related to building massing? And in this part, you can enter in multiple short answers. You don't have to cram it all into one response. That kind of splits things up nicely when we review. And we're going to give some time for you to generate your ideas and then take some time to look over what each other have entered. Just a couple responses here. And if you do need to get back into Slido, those instructions are on the left side of the shared screen. All right, there we go. We've got parks and green spaces between, back upper stories, using space between buildings for community gardens, flowering arrangements and trees on the roofs. Looks like we've got some support for some of the things you already shared, Ben. Greenery, art paths, places to chill, like little tiny pocket parks, green roofs, public art. See, don't add a bunch of requirements that will reduce potential housing production and good environmental design. So being thoughtful there. All right, spend a little more time gathering these, and we will then take some time to scroll down and see each other's entries. And folks have already started to use the upvote function. So that was what we were going to do next, to kind of do some live ranking or polling, finding alignment in the group tonight around what feels most important to you to lift up for the city of Arcata to consider. So once you're done entering your ideas, go ahead and scroll through, and you can click that little thumbs up button or icon on the right-hand side of ideas that you're feeling aligned with. Right. Some other feedback. The first image has a row of Victorian appearing facades. Looks good. Let's see, as folks are upvoting for each other's ideas, what's rising to the top here? 22 for places to chill, like little tiny pocket parks. And that's quite, with 37 respondents, 25 folks upvoting that. That is, that's quite a large percentage of folks agreeing there. We've got parks and green spaces between. Don't add a bunch of requirements that will reduce potential housing production and good environmental design. Having commercial on the first floor makes walking around much more interesting. And things are kind of shifting around as folks continue to upvote. And you can just take a look through these yourself as well, scanning for what other alignments are showing up. Greenery and art paths, community gardens, flowering arrangements, and trees. So we're getting some good ideas. And some of these can be combined or are similar. So you can even see even more of the alignments when we look at it that way as well. All right. Stop the screen share there. And we're now going to transition to the next item on the agenda, reviewing and getting your feedback on the community benefits that are possible and that are most important to you. So back over to you, Ben.
Thanks, Stella. So we're now going to turn our attention to the topic of community benefits. I'll start by defining a community benefit program, and then I'll summarize what the Gateway Area Plan says on this subject. We'll then ask you for input on high priority benefits to consider, again, using Slido. Yeah. Okay, so what is a community benefit program? Essentially, it's a zoning tool where development project applicant receives something of value in exchange for project features and amenities that benefit the general public. So those things of value are often called incentives, and those things that benefit the general public are usually called benefits. Community benefits programs are also sometimes referred to as incentive zoning or value capture. And they're sometimes called value capture because the incentives increase the value of the property for the owner or the developer, and a city can capture some of that increased value for the general public through the required amenities or benefits. And so typically a community benefit program has incentives in the form of increased intensity or the number of units and or a streamlined approval process. Because for a developer, the main thing that increases and adds value is allowing for additional intensity in terms of the number of units for residential, or reducing the costs of the approval process through a streamlined approval process. And community benefits programs identify benefits that are most valued by each individual community. And so they vary from place to place. But amongst communities and cities that have community benefits programs, there are some commonalities in benefits. Often they include additional affordable housing beyond minimum requirements, open space, transportation improvements, infrastructure improvements, things that are most needed or desired or valued by each individual community. And it's important to note that benefits must exceed minimum baseline requirements. So if, for example, a community already has a 10% inclusionary housing requirement, providing that 10% wouldn't be considered a benefit, what would be considered a benefit would be, say, 15% or 20% or some other amount above and beyond whatever the minimum baseline requirement is. And also, there's a relationship here between state density bonus law. So as many of you may know, an applicant can propose a certain number of affordable below market rate units within a project and request incentives or concessions that are necessary in order for that project to be financially feasible. That would be a separate pathway from the community benefits program. So if Arcata had a community benefits program, an applicant would be able to choose either to use state density bonus law or the community benefit program. They wouldn't be able to use both. Okay, so the Gateway Plan lays out the foundation for a community benefits program that would be implemented through the form-based code. And the plan says that projects that provide community benefits are eligible for by right approvals and additional height. And the plan also says that applicants will be able to select benefits from a menu of options to select benefits that are most appropriate for an individual project, and that increased development potential, the incentive, would be calibrated to the value of the benefit provided. So in other words, the higher the value of the benefit, the greater the increased development potential. So that's the foundation, the policy foundation that's in the draft Gateway Plan. And so as described in the Gateway Plan, participating in the community benefits program would be optional. And if an applicant chose not to participate, the project height would be limited to 4 stories with a discretionary design review and potentially use permit requirement. And as we'll talk about a little bit later, 4 stories in most of the Gateway area is the current maximum height. Now, if a project chooses to participate in the community benefits program, it would be subject to a tiered system. And with this system, the greater the value of the benefit, the greater the allowed height. A project contributing at the tier 1 level, the lowest level, would be eligible for a height of 5 stories. And this is something that would be eligible in the entire Gateway area. Now, a project contributing at the tier 4 level, the highest level, would be eligible for a height of 8 stories. And to be eligible for those 8 stories, a project would need to provide the maximum community benefit, providing the maximum value to the community. And now the way the Gateway Plan sets us up, tier 4 would only be available in the Barrel District. So only in the Barrel could a project potentially achieve 8 stories with maximum community benefits. Tier 3 is only in the Barrel and the Hub at 6 stories. At 7 stories. Tier 2 in the Barrel, Hub, and Corridor at 6 stories. And Tier 1 would be available in all subareas, including the neighborhood subarea. And we're going to talk more about height and maximum allowed height later tonight. We understand there's a lot of interest and maybe some concern about these maximum stories that are laid out here. But I'm putting this forward in order to describe to you the policy foundation in the draft Gateway Plan that potentially could change as the plan goes through the public review process. Now, over the past several months, the city has received feedback on high priority benefits in Arcata. City staff has gone to a variety of groups and asked for thoughts and input on the highest priority community benefits. And we're going to ask you tonight which of these benefits are your priority, and if you have any other benefits that you'd like to add to the list. So I'm going to take a moment right now to describe to you these high priority benefits that we've heard about so far. So on the top is affordable housing. And when we say affordable housing, we mean deed restricted below market rate units. We also might mean a mix of housing types and affordable rental and ownership opportunities. Now, open space as a community benefit, we mean land that is dedicated for publicly accessible parks, parklets, plazas, as well as trails and creek daylighting. Tribal housing means housing that's developed in partnership with local tribes. Artist housing means housing developed in partnership with artist housing developers. Public art and streetscape enhancement means publicly art in a visible public location. Could also mean landscaping of streets and buffers beyond minimum requirements. Furniture in public spaces and other similar improvements to the public realm. Funds for parks and trails means a financial contribution for parkland and trail improvements that may not necessarily be used on the specific development site, but would benefit the gateway area and the larger community. Green building means LEED Platinum or equivalent green building feature above and beyond the minimum requirements of the California Green Building Code. And lastly, alternative transportation means an alternative transportation package available to residents, such as bike parking, free bus passes, or membership to a car share program or other similar types of amenities. So those are the community benefits that so far we've heard are high priority. And now we want to know what you think about these community benefits and the community benefit program. We're going to use Slido polling again for that. And I shall hand it back to Sela for that.
Thanks, Ben. All right. So as been mentioned, the city has gathered feedback from Arcata residents, and this was also information compiled from even further back than a few months. We've got data from the 2019 housing workshops, Gateway Area Plan Will Come to You sessions, and otherwise submitted public comment and committee review engagements. So these were identified based on the review of feedback and also with consideration for what is most feasible from an implementation perspective. So please head on back to Slido if you're not there already. And you can select your top 3 priority community benefits. It's not in any particular order for your top 3s from the list provided that Ben just covered. So we'll see how these rank for our participants tonight.
It's exciting to see them shifting around, you know, what's going to end up on top.
So exciting. Right. Got about, on my end, it says about 27 respondents. So I'm going to give us a little more time for folks to get over onto Slido, if not already there, and to rank these. I know it can be hard to choose when you've got, there's so many good things to want to prioritize. So do your best from the long list of options. All right. So it looks like from so far, affordable housing is a top priority for the largest number of folks participating in this ranking. Alternative transportation follows that. Open space, followed by green building. And then we can see below green building, funds for parks and trails, tribal housing, and so forth. Okay. So please stay in Slido. And I'll give this one more, a little bit longer for folks if you're still making your way over there to rank. The next question that we're going to ask is what else you think should be considered a top priority community benefit. So if anything you think is missing from the list that was shared, the city wants to hear that. So please share. And then we're going to again upvote and review together like we did in our last more open form question. All right, so I'm going to stop this one for now and we'll head over to this question. Is there anything you think is missing from that list that you believe should be considered a top priority? And as we look through, it's possible that some of the ideas that folks submit may actually fall within some of those community benefit areas, and that's fine. That's great. So we see public housing projects, clean and resilient energy systems to support the community, pocket parks and plazas again, home ownership, ADA accessible housing, senior housing, are free, expanded public transit, childcare, micro unit housing, rooftop solar, cooperative housing, housing production is most important, considering that adding costs, just jumped off my screen. Let me find that again. Adding costs to building construction through community benefits is counterproductive to goal of increased housing. All right, so take some time now if you are, if you haven't already, to scroll through what others are saying and continue to upvote those that you'd like to uplift as priority community benefits.
There's a lot more coming in at the bottom too, so make sure you're upvoting the latecomers.
All right, and we'll take a look at, we'll go down and take a look at those as well. So public safety features, being able to buy a home, solar electrification. So again, that falls under like green building, for example, which was listed in the priority benefits we ranked earlier. Retail, commercial, on bottom floor, so access pet friendly, funds for art, mixed tenure housing. Right. So let's just take a little bit more time to scroll through and upvote. A lot of great ideas generated. I'll try not to make you dizzy as I scroll all the way back up. All right, we're seeing alignment around micro unit housing for single people, home ownership, expanded public transit, senior housing, cooperative housing, clean and resilient energy system to support the community. I'm going to leave this open, so if you want to continue scrolling and upvoting as we head over to our next topic. Ben is going to now talk about plan policies related to building height.
Great, thank you. All right, so this is the third and final topic for tonight's workshop. And thank you for your patience as you've waited to get to this point, because I know that many of you are very interested in the subject of building height and maximum allowed building height within the plan area. And we deliberately waited to bring this up to the last item tonight because we first wanted to talk about building massing and strategies that could be used to break up the massing of larger buildings to support a more walkable, community oriented feel. And we also wanted to talk about community benefits and how taller, more intensive development could help to enable the city to capture the value from increased heights to provide community benefits that wouldn't otherwise be possible through a development project. So we wanted to frame the discussion of allowed building height with that context of massing strategies and community benefits before talking to you about this important issue. So I'm going to go over existing allowed heights within the gateway area, and then talk about allowed heights as established in the gateway area plan before asking for some of your thoughts on this subject. So here is a diagram that is showing the plan area, and the different colors represent the existing zoning. And existing allowed height is dictated by the zoning district that a property is in. So most of the gateway area is light industrial, and that has a maximum height of 45 feet, which can accommodate a 4-story building. There's a portion of the site that's dark purple, that's heavy industrial, and a heavy industrial property, the city can allow for a height that's more than 45 feet through a use permit process in order to accommodate an even taller building. There's a portion of the gateway area that's currently zoned commercial that allows for 35 feet. 35 feet, you can fit a 3-story building. And there are some other little pockets that are 38 feet maximum height, but the majority of the plan area currently, the maximum allowed height is 45 feet, which can comfortably accommodate a 4-story building. And so, as I've already alluded to previously in tonight's meeting, the draft gateway plan allows for height beyond the existing height allowance if a project provides community benefits and conforms with design standards. And as described before, the greater the value of the benefit provided through the community benefit program, the greater the allowed heights. And there also would be limits on the tallest buildings. Nobody is envisioning the entirety of the gateway area being developed with 7, 8-story buildings. There would be limitations on the location of the tallest buildings, as well as potentially the number of the tallest buildings that are allowed within sub-areas or within the plan area overall. And lastly, projects that include height above the existing limit, as well as all projects, must conform with whatever massing standards ultimately get incorporated into the form-based code. So just to review some of the things that was presented previously, the baseline height within the gateway area would be 4 stories. Additional height would be allowed only if a project provides community benefits. The greater the value of the benefit, the greater the height. And there would be limitations on the tallest buildings with the location, in terms of the location and the number of buildings. So with the way it's set up currently with the community benefit program, up to 5 stories with community benefits would be allowed in the brown areas on the map. That's the neighborhood sub-area. Up to 6 stories maximum in the orange area. That's the corridor. 7 stories in the blue. That's hub. And 8 stories in the Barrel District. And again, 8 stories only for a limited number of projects that incorporate the highest level of community benefits. And any project also needs to conform with all applicable standards within the zoning code, municipal code, as well as building code requirements as well. So lastly, before asking your input on the subject, I do want to say a few words about why the draft plan calls for increasing allowed heights. First, increased heights advances the plan's goal of promoting infill housing production by increasing the number of units that can be accommodated on an individual site. Second, by increasing building height, the city can create additional value that can be captured through the community benefits program. And then third, additional building height increases opportunities for development projects that provide on-site publicly accessible open space, which we've heard tonight is a priority of many people, as well as a greater flexibility to protect, enhance, and restore natural habitats beyond minimum requirements, including doing things like creek daylighting. So those are some of the reasons driving the proposal within the draft gateway plan for these increased heights. So with that, we want to know what you think on this subject. So we'll do our final polling of the evening, and I will hand it back to Sela.
All right. Thank you so much to all who are sticking with us through this. We know there's a lot of back and forth, so appreciate your flexibility in working with us through back and forth the presentation and polling. So like Ben said, this is our home stretch for polling. And I'll share my screen here again. So this first question, given what you know now about the ability to regulate building massing and community benefits, we're just kind of gauging an overall perspective on buildings higher than 4 stories in the gateway area. And then we're going to get into a little more of the specifics for each sub area. Right. Are you open to some of the buildings in the gateway area being taller than 4 stories if this provided community benefits, such as those that you ranked earlier? We've got about, so it looks like over the vast majority are open to the idea of buildings being taller than 4 stories. About 20% are not open to the idea. And 2% who aren't really sure yet. Okay. So we're now going to get your feedback on building height in the sub areas of the gateway plan. So stay here on Slido. So considering the relationship to possible community benefits, what is the maximum number of stories you would support in the barrel sub area? And again, that's outlined in red in that image on our shared screen. Give a little time for folks to respond. So again, the maximum allowed height here would be 8 stories. Okay, looks like over 50% and 54 range would support 8 stories, followed by 6 stories, 5 and 4. So majority here would support 8 stories. Okay, let's go to our next sub area. So again, considering the relationship to possible community benefits, what is the maximum number of stories you would support in the Gateway Hub sub area? So that is outlined there in red on the screen. And the maximum height in this sub area would be 7 stories. Okay, we've got a little over 50% would support 7 stories as the maximum. followed by 4 stories. 24% think 4, which should be the maximum here. And then 5 and 6, the least amount of folks think 6 should be the maximum. Onward. For the Gateway Corridor sub-area, the maximum that would be allowed here is 6 stories. What maximum would you support in this sub-area? We'll just allow for a few more respondents. We've had a little, I think around 50, a little over 50 of folks responding to the others. We're pretty close. All right. 65% would support the highest maximum allowance here at 6 stories, followed by 4 stories at 29%. And our final sub-area for the neighborhood sub-area, what is the maximum number of stories you would support, with 5 being the maximum allowed here? So this one's a little bit closer, with close to 60% would support 5 stories, and not far behind that, 42% supporting the 4-story minimum for the selections options. All right, folks, this concludes the polling for the evening. You did amazing. Thank you so much to everyone who participated. And Dilo is now going to close us out and communicate about additional opportunities to provide feedback, comments, or questions, and next steps and things to expect.
All right. Thank you, Sela. I'm going to remove pin. We did end up pinning, and boy howdy, it was a lot of pinning. But we made it through. We're all good. We made it to the end, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us. It looks like we still have 56 attendees. So I really appreciate that. And we all really appreciate everyone sharing their feedback. So I'm just going to take a quick moment here and run through next steps. How do you stay engaged and involved in this process if you just had so much fun tonight that you want to keep going? So one important thing that's coming next is the study session that I mentioned between the Planning Commission and the City Council. That will be a week from today, this time next week. They will be meeting, and one of the main topics they will be covering is building height in this community benefits program. They also will be talking about some of the circulation options that are laid out in the draft plan. So if you have additional thoughts or want to, make sure other people weigh in on this before next week, please ask them to reach out and provide their comments in advance. The public comment at this meeting will be pretty limited because we're hoping to really retain that time for the decision makers to really dig into the details and hash out our direction. And through the rest of this year, we will be making the revisions to this document that I mentioned earlier, and we also are working on updating other elements of our general plan concurrently. You can find a schedule of when those elements are going to various related committees or the Planning Commission on that engagement page that I shared at the beginning. We also will be providing a post-meeting survey and feedback form. It's very basic. If there are questions or comments, if this generated additional ideas for you, you can fill that out, and it also gives you an opportunity to sign up for our e-notifications if you want to get emails from us about all of the fun things we're doing. We also will be having another workshop similar to this one, but talking about some of the other elements of design, some of those 6 aspects of design that Ben mentioned earlier, and that will be coming in the next couple of months. I also wanted to highlight we have more height-related information available on our YouTube page. This video this recording for this session will be made into a video as well. You can find these on our YouTube page, City of Arcata. We have a strategic infill redevelopment program playlist if you want to subscribe to that. And these will provide additional information if you want to review those before providing additional feedback to the Planning Commission and City Council. So this is the link and the QR code directly to the feedback form. Again, it's very simple and basic, and the intent is to allow participants to add any additional feedback. And to be clear, this is separate from the survey, which will be made available for folks who didn't get a chance to attend tonight. And once the recording of this meeting is available on the YouTube page, we'll be sending that out with the survey so people can review both of those and have the information we provided to you all tonight. So stay in touch. We have our department contact information, our department email here as well as how to sign up for e-notifications, and also our infill plan page, which I already had shared with you. So thank you again all for coming tonight. I think I'll leave this up for just another minute, and then we will be calling it for the evening. We will hopefully hear from you before next week's presentation, and I hope you all have a wonderful night. Thank you so much.